So I'm here with Akash Palkhiwala, the CFO, and for the last couple of years, I think, the COO of Qualcomm. Now, we all know Qualcomm as the company that makes the chipsets in our handsets, the modems, but obviously, with AI particularly, just an explosion of chips everywhere, and Qualcomm's no different. You're moving into all kinds of new devices, all kinds of new use cases. So, a few years ago as a tech reporter, if I was talking about the future of AI, I wouldn't be talking about chips. But right now, I think the world wants to understand what's happening in the chip industry because it really is the foundation, the kind of center of so much of what's going on. So let's start with ChatGPT. We are 3 years on from what in many ways was the foundational moment for AI. Generative AI was going on many years before that. We could all see it building up, but then suddenly it just exploded into public consciousness and into the minds of every business user because of that one moment. 3 years on, we are just at that point where we're saying, well, what is this thing going to do to the world? It hasn't done it yet, despite, I think, a lot of claims, I've been hearing that this would be the year of AI agents, for instance. We're still waiting for that to happen. So what does it look like from where you're sitting, Akash?
Yeah.
Is it AI delayed or is it happening? What are you seeing on the ground?
It's interesting. First of all, thanks for having me here. This is an incredible time to be in the technology industry, to be in the semiconductor industry, and for Qualcomm to be at this intersection of the transformation that's happening around the world with AI, and to be able to take the technology we create in phones and apply it to a whole another set of industries like automotive, like PCs, like wearable devices, and now data centers and robotics. Super excited about what we can do with what the technology portfolio that Qualcomm has created. In the short term, kind of as we think about the last 3 years, we are incredibly excited because you can see how the momentum is building. We started with a ChatGPT moment, and since then we have had a lot of small explosions of innovations. And you've seen a bunch of different companies start working on models in parallel as well. The performance of these models continue to get better. We've gone from text models to multimodal models. We've gone from early inferencing to reasoning to mixture of experts, all these new technologies coming in. And each one of these things make the models a lot better. And while today there isn't as much you can hold on to in terms of the value that they're adding, especially in large corporations, we can see the clear pathwork. You can see the dots, and the dots are connecting, and they're leading to an incredibly positive place in our minds. So I'll give you a few examples of what we're doing at Qualcomm. So Qualcomm obviously is very much an engineering-driven company, and then we write a tremendous amount of software. Using AI models to be able to talk like a human being to the model and have it write software, have it check your software, have it write test cases and things like that. We're already experimenting at scale. It is a part of some of the development that we're doing today and deploying in our products. And we see the path to really continuing to scale this very significantly over the next couple of years. So that's one area, is writing code.
Let me ask you, by the way, I've heard questions about the quality of code that's coming out of these coding agents. Can you tell yet what contribution they're going to make? Are they going to be as good as the professional coders?
So we think about it in two parts. First is think of it as someone who is assisting you to write the code. And typically in a large organization, you'll have a new engineer come in. The new engineer will write the code, but you're going to have someone more senior maybe check the code before you submit it into the product. Think of AI as replacing a new engineer, a new graduate. And so it is writing that quality of code. And really a lot of that also goes on the quality of the prompt that you're asking. If you ask a very specific question, you get a pretty
So
specific
for the
and
best-
good quality answer.
So for the best coders, they get the biggest productivity boost from all of this.
They do,
This
and
is
that's why
really
prompt
making-
engineering has become such a big thing.
Yeah,
Is really the skill of asking the question the right way.
Yeah.
But
Can
it's
we all look forward to that, by the way, in our professional lives? Do you think that this is going to be something that really makes the most accomplished people that much more productive?
when you take the generalization that far broad, I'm not sure that that's necessarily going to be true. But I do think that there is a skill to asking the question the right way
Yeah.
to an AI
Yeah.
model. And the more context, the more information that you can add to the question, the better quality of the answer that you would receive.
Yeah.
And so it is one of the skills. I mean, my son is an aspiring computer science graduate, and one of the things that I always keep telling him is you have to be really good at asking the question the right way. And this generation is growing up in the world of ChatGPT. It comes very naturally to them.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to see a lot more benefit, and this is not necessarily to age, but we're seeing new graduates pick this up much faster than people who've been in the workplace for a longer time.
So you're seeing coding is one real benefit. that you're
Coding
seeing
is
already.
one real benefit. Let me give you a couple more. So
Yeah.
second is we design a lot of chips at Qualcomm, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things you have to do is you design the core technology, but then you use those Lego blocks to make the design of a chip. We think there's a role for AI to be played, where AI will help us design the layout of the chips, and it will accelerate how quickly we can get products to market. The value of that to us is tremendous, right? Because we are all in this highly competitive industry, and it's a race to launch new products. And to the extent you can use tools like AI to develop the products faster and get them to market
So this is
faster,
a
there's lot
time,
of
you
value.
just measure this by time.
Time to market is a clear
to
benefit.
market,
There's
yeah.
engineering cost savings as well.
Yeah.
But for us, the primary benefit is time to market.
Yeah. So these are real benefits now, or these are things you're experimenting with?
These are real benefits,
No.
but we are in the early part of the deployment, and we have clear line of sight where this will scale very significantly. I'll give you one more example that we think is very significant is with customer service. When we deploy our chips to our customers and they're doing development on top of it, we get a lot of questions back with how do I make this change, how do I use this piece of technology, and we have a lot of documentation that they could refer to. But with AI, it's much easier for them to ask a question, get an answer right away, sometimes without any intervention of an engineer from our side, and then they can go along their merry way and continue the development process.
Yeah. So one thing you mentioned just now was that we are seeing these models develop. You know, we all talked about hallucinations 2 or 3 years ago. We still talk about it, but not quite as much, because it seems that there are more techniques for grounding the models to make them not veer off course quite as often. So to what extent does what we currently know about it, these AI models, fulfill this longer term view that you're talking about, this longer term vision of how much it's going to be helpful? Is it just an engineering challenge that we've got to work out how to implement it? Or do we need big breakthroughs? Do we need more big breakthroughs to make this live up to its promise?
Yeah, and I think you almost have to break the problem statement into two parts, the two parts that you outlined. First is, how do the models continue to develop? And let's assume that we get incremental improvements for the next couple of years. Even with that, we think the models are already in a very significant place where they can add a lot of value to things that companies do on a day-to-day basis. And I gave you a few examples. There are a few other examples on the supply chain, finance, business development side. The second part of the conversation is, how do you take these models and actually implement something at scale in your organization? And there's a separate process to that, right? And so that involves changing processes, that involves getting buy-in from people and changing people's behaviors. And sometimes that takes longer than actually the technology piece of it. And so we're running both in parallel.
People seem to be always surprised by that second thing that you mentioned there, that this stuff just takes longer. Is that what's happening at the moment? Three years after ChatGPT, it's just longer than people thought.
That's a portion of it. I think changing people is a tough business to be in, right?
Yeah.
It takes longer than you think. And this is about a very large working population absorbing new technology and changing it as a result of it. But we don't think in terms of months or a couple years, right? We think in terms of few years. And what is the opportunity is in 5 years out, I think is extremely clear to most of us. And I think we're going to be able to deploy these technologies at scale and incredibly transform things that companies do.
What, in 2-3 years? If it's not 5 years, when is it going to happen?
I'm very confident that in 2 to 3 years, Qualcomm is going to have very significant benefit, both in terms of time to market and cost as we deploy these technologies.
Yeah. Well, now, one thing obviously that you're known for here is mobile phones, handsets, devices of all kinds. You have low power chips that work at what they call the edge of the networks. And we've seen a type of network, the mobile networks that you thrived in. What we're moving into is going to be completely different. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the data center for the last year or two. I think the world has learned much more about data centers than anybody ever thought they were going to. It feels to me like we're going to be talking a lot more about the edge the next year or two, because this intelligence has to get closer to people. It has to get closer to the world to be of use. But it's taking time. There are both technology bottlenecks and there are use case bottlenecks. We've seen Apple, for instance, take longer with Apple Intelligence on the handset than they initially thought 18 months ago. So tell me a little about this. When is intelligence coming to somewhere useful close to the edge where people are going to get real benefit from it? How are we going to notice it? How's it first going to
So that's a great question, and one of our favorite topics at Qualcomm, right? So we have this firm belief that where AI is going is, of course, it started in the data center. And there's a lot more that'll happen in the data center, and we want to participate in that. But the next step is really taking those models and taking smaller models and deploying them in edge devices and having a hybrid AI deployment. Just like computing today, some computing happens on the phone, a lot of computing happens in the cloud, and you split computing between the two. And you're going to have the same thing happen in AI. There'll be some AI use cases and processing that happens on the device, and some will happen in the cloud, and there will be a hybrid between the two scenarios. So that's our vision going forward. And we're very confident that if you move the equation of time for a second, the absolute outcome is very clear to us, and I think to the rest of the industry now. In terms of specific use cases on the edge, let me give you a couple things that are already happening at scale on the edge. The best place to think about AI deployed at the edge at scale is autonomous driving, right? So when you get into your Tesla or any of the other automotives, and we're seeing several ADAS deployments happening where AI is used to control the action of the car. Whether it's staying in the lane, keeping the distance with the car in front of it. Yes, the sensors are involved. The sensors provide data to our AI chip, and then our AI chip drives the car effectively in telling it what to do. And that is the reason why you do it on the edge is there's no time to go to the cloud. You're driving at an incredible speed. You cannot tolerate the latency of going to the cloud and coming back. You also cannot always rely on a wireless network being available that you could go and run an inference on the cloud. So that's a great example of a device where it sits on the vehicle, it doesn't go to the cloud, and it runs all the time. So that's one case of AI deployment at the edge. The second case, and you're seeing this emerge slowly, we have this vision around personal AI devices. And Meta Ray-Ban glasses, as an example, is a personal AI device. You can wear it on your face. It can see what you can see. It can hear what you can hear. And it is something you can talk to. So you could ask your glasses, what phone is that? Who is this? Please make a payment at this QR code. And because the glasses can see what you can see, it has a camera in it, all these use cases are real. They are happening now. Remind me to take medicine at 4 p.m. And it becomes a personal assistant to you that you can just talk to. And you ask questions, and it'll give you answers to all those questions. I think that is happening now. Over the next 2 years, you're going to see this significant expansion of personal AI devices and how people interact with their devices.
Yeah. On this question of why intelligence is going to move into these new places, it strikes me we hear about privacy, for instance, that you want your data to be on your device, so you want the intelligence to come to you, not the other way around. It strikes me, one thing we don't hear a lot about is the economics of all of this. But given that inference costs are becoming a huge factor in AI, for any company with AI-based applications, they're facing incredible, well, we don't really know yet. The more it gets used, the higher their costs are going to be in just running these applications. So if the inference is happening on my phone, that's going to be my chip, my cost, not the application provider. How big a factor is this in, do you think, the economics of AI at the edge?
I think it's a very significant factor, and it becomes a bigger factor as it gets deployed broader, as it goes into emerging markets where the affordability is even lower. And you should think of it as, to run something on the edge, there are multiple reasons to do it. I gave you an example of latency. You don't have the time to go to the cloud and come back. Privacy and security are massive reasons, right? There is certain data that you don't want to send to the cloud, and you can run AI on it on the device. The third reason is the device has a lot more context about you. It knows where you are, what is around you, and so it can run use cases that are different than the cloud. And then the final one is cost, right? Once you purchase the device, running an extra inference event is free. Versus using the cloud, where obviously the resources are extremely expensive. So there's several good reasons to run inference and AI on the device.
Yeah, it's just a question of persuading people there is a reason to upgrade their handset to get that more powerful chip and so on.
Yeah, I think the way it works in technology is relatively straightforward. I think once the use cases come through, we've seen consumers adopt these use cases at incredible pace. This has been the history of the phone industry, where we've gone from a very simple device to an incredibly capable device today. And the consumers have followed it because you're adding so much value to their lives, to everything they do on a daily basis, adoption is not really an issue once you get the right use cases in place and the technologies in place, which usually takes time.
I was struck when you were talking about your examples there that autonomous driving, smart glasses of one kind or another, these are things that people have talked about for many years in the tech industry. I've written about for many years, and it's often felt like the technology has been out ahead of the users, out ahead of the use cases. But interestingly, as you say, the Meta Ray-Bans there's a real market for these. The entire industry now is looking at how people want to put a camera on their face. I don't yet, but I don't know whether you do, but it seems to be coming. And autonomous driving, last time in San Francisco, I spent a week in a Waymo, and it was a wonderful experience.
Yes.
I don't think 5 years ago we might have thought, well, we talked about it, but it wasn't happening, right? But right now it is.
It's interesting. The way the technology works is, you think you know where the innovation will come from, right? And so we were working, as an example, with Meta, we've been working on augmented reality, virtual reality devices. And that's how we were going to deliver these personalized experiences. In the meantime, ChatGPT shows up, AI models make all this progress, and now what used to be this vision of augmented virtual reality glasses has transitioned over to AI smart glasses. And so the innovation is happening. What we were hoping the market would take off has taken off in a very different way. But that's the history of the technology industry. You can't always pre-plan it. But once you know that the core technologies are there, you kind of go through a little bit of a process to find the right use cases, to find the right implementation, and then you fly from there.
But it feels as though the AI industry, this AI wave, hasn't quite found its perfect device yet. We all remember, some of us do, when the iPhone was launched, it landed at exactly the right moment, and it was an aha moment for a lot of people, because you realize that this was the right device for the right time. As the networks got more powerful, and as the software started to give you these greater capabilities in your handset, we haven't yet seen that for AI. And it's interesting, we've seen Johnny Ive go to work for OpenAI and talk about, let's find a way to create these new devices, these new formats. They're going to really make something of this technology. what are you seeing? You know, Qualcomm, your chips are in a lot of different things. Are we going to have this period of experimentation? Let's try brooches, let's try watches, let's try earbuds, or and is it going to be a mixture of all these things, or do you think something that's going to just kind of break like the smartphone did?
Well, so if you think about all the innovation cycles that has happened in technology over the last 25, 30 years, right? We started with the internet. And the initial use cases were focused on browsing. And then from that, several new businesses got created, several new business models got created. And the core innovation led to a complete transformation of how we do business, right? You think about your example for the iPhone coming out. Initially, the App Store had a few apps. And then a year later, there were tens of apps, and there were hundreds of apps, and there were thousands of apps. And these thousands of apps is really what made the device incredibly usable. We're seeing the same thing happen as an example in smart glasses. We're starting with a few use cases, but once you let the developer ecosystem go and you release the core capabilities to the developer ecosystem, you're going to see a lot of use cases come through and get added on top. And then it goes very much like the App Store, where the utility continues to increase as new use cases come in. So that's our vision of how the world plays out. What's interesting is we've lived in this world where the phone is in the middle and there are companion devices around the phone. As we go forward, we increasingly think of the AI assistant as something that sits in the middle. And then your phone, your earbuds, your glasses, everything around you is a way to access.
So the thing in the middle is actually this abstract. It's a piece of software.
It's a piece of software that, in a lot of cases, knows you very well, understands you very well, and becomes an agent for you to do actions that you need to go do. And it's something that you'll access across a series of devices. And the more personal the device, the more information that the agent can have, and the better it becomes at serving your needs. And so we have this vision where the way we interact with devices is going to change. The devices that we interact with will also change, because all these things need to lend itself to the easiest interaction with an agent.
Yeah.
And that's the future, and we are incredibly excited.
They all have a part to play, all those devices.
That's right.
Through their different. So it's very appealing to think, and we always kind of approach these new eras of technology with this idea of personal empowerment, that I'm going to control the data, I'm going to control my experience, and the world will organize itself around me. And I can remember we did that when the web was new.
Sure.
Right? The world doesn't always shape that way, because there are many corporate strategies and other people who have a view. And just take one example, because it's something I hear people talk about a lot, is this idea of an agent. We're just addressing this question of what is an agent, what does it do, who is it doing it for? And it's such an important question for the next 2 to 3 years. On the one hand, a personal agent, and we hear OpenAI talk about my personal superintelligence, something that works for me to interpret the world. On the other hand, every business has invested in an app, in a website, in an infrastructure to understand their customers, to work with their customers. We're starting to, and they will be building agents, their own agents.
Sure.
And someone's going to act as an aggregator for those agents at some point. Maybe there'll be an app store for agents. I don't know. That side hasn't taken shape yet. But at some point, my agent is going to come up, and it's already starting, against all those corporate interests and strategies, all those corporate agents, all those things that are happening, people trying to organize my data. It's going to be a fascinating time. Any clues yet, do you think, as to who's going to come out on top, and how do we keep personal empowerment in the forefront?
Well, our view is the consumers are going to come out on top. But let's pick an example.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how we make an airline reservation or vacation reservation today.
Yeah.
You pick up your phone, you open an Expedia app or some other app, and then you have to look for something super specific, right? And you say, I want to fly from this place to this place on this date, and it gives you a bunch of options. And it's like you're working with a machine. You're talking to a machine, and machine is responding to a set of queries you're putting in. Why couldn't we have a scenario where I ask my agent that, hey, I would like to go to San Francisco tomorrow. I want to leave in the evening, preferably after 5 p.m., come back the following day, late in the evening after dinner with friends. I don't want to spend more than $500 on flights, and I need a hotel, and I don't want to spend more than $250, but I want to be close to San Jose downtown. Now, this is a very complex query. The agent then has to go and talk to other agents. It has to go talk to a hotel agent. It has to go talk to an airline agent. And so my agent might go to Expedia's agent and go find an airline and have an interaction with it.
So this is going to be machine to machine.
It's a machine, and there's a protocol that has already been published.
Absolutely.
It's called agent-to-agent protocol.
Yeah.
And then there is a protocol that Expedia's website will have, which is called an MCP protocol, which is how you get the data from it.
Yeah.
And all these information comes together, and then I get an answer to my pretty detailed query that my agent now worked for me.
But Southwest Airlines has invested a lot of money in, perhaps I'm using them as an example, in capturing my attention. I go to their website and then they engage me. They've invested heavily in this. They understand me, and then they upsell me. Who knows what they upsell me? Does that all go away?
I think some of these models can work together. I think your agent can still go, and if I'd added the information that I want to fly Southwest Airlines, my agent could have gone to Southwest Airlines. It would know my loyalty card number, and it would put it in and then get the information for me. So I think these models can exist together. Some of them will get disrupted, but it's for us to see as to how all of these things play out, and it creates disruption opportunities, but it also creates growth opportunities for companies, and that's why it's an exciting time.
Yeah. And as you say, this is very much the next 2 to 3 years. Those protocols are now in place. So we've now got an overlay on the web, if you like, a new way for machines to interact that will start to explore whole new ways of interaction.
Yeah, and I think you have
kind of interesting
3 waves of stuff to do, right? You have the technology to put in place, then you have the business arrangements to put in place, and then you have the users need to adopt and get used to the technology as well. So I think there's multiple things that need to happen.
Yeah.
But I prefer not to talk about the next 12 to 18 months. I prefer to talk about what the opportunity is 2 to 5 years out. And that seems very clear. The transition timing, there's a process we are still going through.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. We've talked about the edge, where things are moving to, and it's just an incredible period. Seems to me. I'm really excited about it all. I'm not a gadget freak, but I really want to try some of these things.
You should.
Yeah. But the data center. So Qualcomm has waded into the data center market. Not your natural or your earlier habitat, if you like.
Yeah.
But clearly you think you've got silicon that suits that market as it moves from this heavy duty training to inference to kind of producing tokens at the lowest price and the most efficient way. You've got technology to kind of go for that, but it's in the middle of a boom. Everybody's targeting this market. Tell me about why. Why do you think this is something that Qualcomm should be investing in?
So it's interesting. The data center, as you pointed out, is changing a lot, right?
Yeah.
There a lot of capacity that has been built till now has been focused on training. As we go forward, a lot of it is going to be around reasoning, inference. And so what is needed from chips to enable those things is a little different than what is needed for training. The second thing that's happening is within inference, you're seeing this massive constraint, and within training, you're seeing this constraint where power becomes very important. So the performance is now being based on how much performance per watt you can deliver. And that is something Qualcomm does very well. We are in all these battery-powered devices on the edge. We know how to deliver performance per watt that exceeds what someone else can deliver. And so as power becomes important in data center, our technologies become more relevant. The third thing that we're seeing in data centers is we used to have kind of one common chip that does a bunch of different things in data center. But as you kind of get into specialized workloads where you have LLM models, you have text models, you have vision models, you're going to need different qualities in the chips that do inferencing. As an example, memory bandwidth is a constraint in the data center. So we're delivering a solution that is very high in terms of memory bandwidth, and so it solves a problem that exists in the data center as well. So the opportunity for us is very large market. We take the technology we've created for handsets and in some ways supersize it to put it into solutions for data center. And we think there are a few things that are unique that Qualcomm can bring to the table, and that's what we're bringing to the data center market.
I mean, one thing that strikes me about AI is it is such an incredible opportunity for the tech industry at large. What always happens at a time like this is everybody's eyes kind of open wide at the opportunity. And I see it in every company I talk to. Well, I can go to this market, I can go to that market, I can have a piece of this market. And we suddenly see this kind of expansion. Now, I know that Qualcomm was already in this kind of diversification phase, that you've been putting down roots in all kinds of new areas. But is there a risk of just overstretching for too many things here? Not just you, but the industry at large, that everybody wants to kind of race into these new markets. But we all know that you've got to build a culture, you've got to build a go-to-market, you've got to build the products, you've got to build the confidence of customers. I mean, this takes time.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Qualcomm has built this muscle of taking the technology that we create for handsets and applying it to all these new industries. Automotive is a great example of an industry that we were not players in,
right,
but we had unique technology. We brought it into the automotive customers, and now I would argue we are one of the most important chip suppliers to the industry going forward. We think the same applies to data center, where there is these very large customers, the hyperscalers. They are already our customers for edge devices. Like as an example, Microsoft, Google, they know us very well because we supply chips to them for devices at the edge. They know our technologies, they know our technical prowess and how good we are at supporting large customers. And so we're bringing our reputation, we're bringing our technology chops to the data center market. And these players are very eager and willing to partner with us as we bring the right solutions in.
Wow. Where obviously one of the big stories of the year has been data center investment, infrastructure investment.
Yes.
And as the year's gone on, we've seen the amounts being committed just rise steadily. So to the extent that, sitting here now, US economic growth is being driven quite heavily by data center investment. And yet you're talking about the potential, but you're saying, well, we don't know, it might be 3 years, it might be 5 years. The payback on this investment is somewhere out there. Is there a growing risk that the revenue is simply not going to keep up with this kind of very, very heavy wave of investment we're seeing going on? Thinking specifically about data centers here.
Yeah. I think as we look few years out, in our minds, the end point or the midpoint even is very clear, that we're going to see the kind of productivity increases that we've maybe never seen in terms of the history of the technology industry. What AI brings to the table, not just in terms of things that companies like Qualcomm can do, and I gave you a few examples, but when you multiply that through consumers, through enterprises, through various industries, the opportunity is almost limitless in terms of leveraging AI to drive efficiency, to drive productivity, to drive new things that we couldn't do in the past. And so when you think about the investments today that are happening in data center in context of that opportunity, it's very logical and very easy to understand. And so the worst case scenario to me is we invested a little bit too early and the use cases came in a little later. But I think most companies are willing to take that risk because eventually the use cases are going to come up at scale, and the capacity that the investments that are being made right now will all be used up as the use of AI scales.
I mean, that's one thing that, I guess we don't talk about quite as much. It's just the demand here is phenomenal, has been phenomenal for the last few years. And as much as is built is needed and a lot more. But how long is the horizon, do you think, for this industry? Can people see a year out, 2 years out? Because these are longer term investments. These data centers take time to build. Can Can the industry turn on this investment, turn it off as demand ebbs and flows?
I think if you take the long-term view, you're going to keep investing for a while, right? This is just the beginning in my mind.
Yeah.
We're going to create new industries, new devices. Think about robotics and humanoids as this incredible industry that's going to develop at scale. Again, you can debate the timing on it, but I think the outcome is relatively clear. I think the technologies are now going to be in place, and you're seeing companies already investing very significantly to effectively build an army of these robots that are going to add to the productivity of human beings. And when you start deploying those at scale and the amount of inferencing that all these devices are going to start driving, think about handsets running AI, think about PCs running AI, robotics, automotive, really every endpoint in the world. And then there's an incredible number of endpoints. They're all going to be running AI use cases. And if you think about each of those endpoints now require a companion data center capability, I think we're going to be investing for a while. And it's really how we navigate through this process of growth and make sure we get to the right outcome is what's incumbent, the challenge that's incumbent on all of us.
I wanted to finish on robotics because it's just such an intriguing potential. That is humanoid robotics, because we're starting to see so much talk about that. And people talk about that as potentially the biggest market of all, one of the biggest markets of all, right? Have you seen anything yet that gives you confidence that this is happening in practice, that it's going to be happening soon?
Yeah, I think one of the key things to monitor when new technologies are coming in is the pace of improvement. And the pace of improvement in developing robotics, humanoid-related solutions is incredible, right? We think of humanoids as a part of a category called physical AI. So you're starting with cars. Autonomous cars is effectively the stepping stone to a robot, right? And robot is effectively an autonomous car that's standing up and has a lot more degrees of freedom than an automotive would have. And so we clearly think there's an opportunity to scale this industry in a very, very large way. If you also look at warehouses, someone like Amazon, they've been using robotics in warehouses for a long period of time. It doesn't look like a humanoid, it looks different, but in a lot of ways it's very similar, and humanoid will be the next evolution of what Amazon has been using in warehouses for a while. So we're very confident. I think Qualcomm is uniquely positioned to be one of the chip leaders in humanoids. If you think about a humanoid robot, it requires everything Qualcomm's good at. It requires wireless technology, it requires very low power, it requires a very good camera. It requires sensor fusion, taking the input from all these sensors in the robot and making sense of it. It requires things like object tracking that we do because we're in glasses. And so we have these incredible set of technologies that are all going to be relevant in humanoids. And so we're very excited about that industry as well.
Good. Well, Akash, thank you very much for joining us today. I think I look forward to sitting down with you again in 5 years' time and seeing where we are then. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Have a good one.